everyone can be looking forward to. Awards program next week at the Copley. The highlighted one here is We're Biased as part of the CS&D committee. On the 18th, there's a next installment of the Uncover Your Strengths program that's been really, really well received. So hopefully we'll see you at any or all of these upcoming programs. You can see more detail, register, follow along with all of the CoreNet activities and events on the New England website and our social media channels. And of course, a big thanks to all the corporate sponsors. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to put on this programming and collect all of these great thought leaders here today. So now we can get into the meat of why everyone is here today. I'm going to introduce Therese Consalvo, who's with Cressa. She's going to introduce our panel and we'll jump right in.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on your lunch hour today. We have a great panel in front of us and a wonderful conversation planned. We're going to discuss strategies related to career transitions, leveraging your network, as well as the current hiring market and more. All the panelists today have recently or are currently going through a career transition. I also just went through a career transition recently myself, so I have experienced similar ups and downs of that process. And my co-moderator, Christina, as the Senior Director of Recruitment, is going to give us some unique insight into today's market, what hiring companies are looking for, as well as trends from applying candidates. So we are lucky to have so many unique points of view today. On behalf of myself and Christina, as well as the Career Strategies and Development Committee, I'd like to thank our panelists for taking time to be here today and speak to our CoreNet community. So now I will stop talking and let our panelists introduce themselves and give us a little summary on their recent transition. So Robin, why don't you start us off?
Okay, great. Well, it's so nice to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me to be with this wonderful group of women. I think career transitioning is something that we always go through. It's never ending in this industry. People's jobs change, often both because of what they want to do and sometimes it's not their choice. So I'm currently at DENS Facility Services. I'm the EVP of Operations and Development for DENS. I've started about just almost a year ago. It'll be a year and a month, so 11 months. I've had a number of different jobs over the years. I've had to reinvent myself many times, but this time was especially challenging because I went to a completely different part of the industry. Before this, for the past 25 years, I've been in project management. I was most recently COO of Hariba Consultants, a project management firm here in the Boston, Cambridge area, working in the life science sector. Before that, I was at JLL and Fidelity Investments as a project manager and have had a number of different jobs throughout the years. But what I was really looking to do with my job at DENS was to transition from being a project manager to being a business leader. This has been a journey that I've been on for the past 5 or 10 years. I am a graduate of the 2.0 program. And so part of my leadership journey was to move from just doing the work to managing the work and being a leader within my business. So my move to DENS has allowed me to take that leadership role, and I'm really looking forward to what the future is going to bring.
Thanks, Robin. Chris, why don't you go next?
Thank you. So Chris Escovito, I work at Timberline Construction. I'm the Director of Business Development there. I'm involved in CoreNet in a number of different ways. I'm on the awards committee, communications committee. I'm the liaison to the Career Strategy and Development committee, and I just graduated Leadership 2.0 last month. So for the first 15 years of my career, I worked for a furniture dealer. I've always been on the furniture side. After the dealership, I went to the manufacturer side and kind of was just trying to figure out where else I could go in that world. So I decided to switch to the more services side. It was December 2019. So I started on it at OPM January 2020, hit the ground running for about a month until March of 2020, when we all know what happened then. I was sent home for 2 weeks And the rest is kind of history. Furloughed over the summer and was told, you know, you're not coming back. So I kind of had to really figure out what I wanted to do on that side. And being, you know, from furniture and working for an entrepreneurial company, then to a large manufacturer, I really wanted to focus back into that entrepreneurial kind of company where I could have ownership, relationships, and be able to talk to them. I saw a post on LinkedIn, and that's, I guess we can get into that in a little bit, but and that's how I ended up at Timberline Construction.
Thanks, Chris. And Brenda, last but certainly not least. Oh, you're on mute.
How's that?
Good.
Sorry about that. Brenda Boissonneau, and my background, similar to Chris's, has always been on the furniture side and either sales or leadership on the dealership, and probably for a little over 20 years. And my most recent position has been with Herman Miller as the regional sales director covering New England. And this was my first stint on the manufacturing side. And so unfortunately, I was impacted by the exciting Miller-Knoll merger late last fall. So my situation was unexpected, even though I knew it was possible because the merger was announced in April. However, my team was really strong, having lots of success, and there wasn't a Knoll counterpart. For those of you that know Holland, she had left the manufacturing side and gone to the dealer. So part of me, and along with others, I thought, well, I actually think I might be safe. But what they decided to do is double territory. So my counterpart and good friend, who was a regional sales director for Connecticut and upstate New York as well, was now going to manage New England on top of that. So I was definitely disappointed and surprised, but I, again, knew that it was possible. So I had lots of emotions, especially getting the news while in the middle of my vacation in Carmel, just days before my niece's wedding. So first and foremost, when you do get news like this, you know, first things first, family and good memories. So I think I did a pretty good job putting that aside until I got back. And I do think I've been really fortunate to be allowed time to reflect and think about what was next due to a generous severance package. So I was fortunate there. I am currently engaged with a short-time consulting gig and have a proposal in for another one through my network, some of which has all been through Cornet. So I'm grateful to that. So that's been interesting. And I am very much looking for my next full-time opportunity, and we'll share more of that journey in the ups and downs and all the way around. So looking forward to it.
Thanks, Brenda. So let's dive into some questions. What factors were important to you when looking for a new company that maybe weren't factors or as important pre-pandemic? And how might your experience throughout the pandemic have contributed to what you've chosen to make important? Chris, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so I briefly touched on just kind of how I started my career in a dealership. When I started, it was, you know, the largest Knoll dealer in New England, but relatively small in comparison to other dealerships, and worked with them and helped them grow. And I felt like I really was impactful in their business, and I wanted that feeling again. I loved being able to talk to ownership and bounce ideas off of them. So I didn't have that when I worked for the manufacturer side. You know, when you work for a manufacturer, they're headquartered somewhere in the middle of the Midwest somewhere, and you know, you don't get to have that relationship. So for me, it was, I knew I wanted to be part of that, and going forward for the rest of my career, I know I want that. I just really love to have that kind of family belonging, part of a team. So that for me was a big factor.
Great. And Robin?
So for me, I think the pandemic really wasn't a huge factor in how I made the transition. I think the transition was going to happen anyway. Similar to a lot of you, I wasn't expecting to be without a job. So I had been instrumental in forming Hariva and was running the company And through that 5-year transition from creating a company to running a firm of 25 people, I realized that leadership and being able to, as Chris said, have direct result, have your actions directly result in changes to the business, be able to affect the business and be able to make decisions was something that became really important to me. And so when I found myself out of work, I really had to do some soul searching and decide what was going to be my next career path. I think one thing the pandemic did allow was for me to take that time. And I'm thinking about what Brenda said about having to put it in a box and deal with your family and the things that come first. So sometimes when you're caught off guard with a job change that you weren't expecting, you do have to focus on yourself. So I think the one benefit of the pandemic is it did allow me to take a little bit of a break from the everyday having to put a smile on and get out there and be friendly. It allowed me to have a little bit of that time to focus on myself and what it was I wanted, what was important to me. But I couldn't have done it without my network. So even though I was taking some time, I was very actively engaged with all my Cornet friends and my other business friends in doing research, figuring out what the next steps were going to be. So while I don't think it changed my attitude towards where I was going to go, I did think it probably gave me a little bit of time to do that soul searching that our regular schedule doesn't always allow for.
Sure. And Brenda, what factors are important to you as you're in the middle of your search?
Well, I kind of agree with Robin that some things haven't changed too much. But I think for me personally, culture is huge. So that's an important aspect as far as the people that are leading the company, as well as my coworkers that I'd be working with, that, they're smart, driven. There's a dynamic environment where they're wanting to, that they're driven, and we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. So not that mentality of, well, it's never been done like that. So always so an innovative spirit is important to me, no matter what the size. I will say I have been always someone that's been in the office, whether it's been required technically or not, 5 days a week. It'd be hard to go back to that 5 days, although I do love being in the office, 2 to 3 days. So that might be a factor. There was the company that I had interviewed with, and I really would have been okay coming in 5 days. I just didn't, it was definitely wanting me to micromanage a team. And, I'm a little bit more of the mindset of being respectful of how people work and how they can do their best work. So I don't want something that's too rigid or kind of in a box that it's got to be done a certain way. So that's something that's still important to me, and probably even more so because of COVID.
And Chris and Robin, you guys have touched on, switching disciplines within your industry, and it sounds like that was a very mindful transition for you guys. But is there anything, you might drill down a little bit deeper into, what made you do that? Was there something specific that enticed you to go from furniture to construction, for example? Or was it more specific to wanting to have an impact in a different way? Did it really matter kind of which piece of the industry you are in? Talk a little bit more about that transition.
I think for me, it was, I kind of had reached where I was going to go, right? It was like, I tried dealership, I tried the manufacturer. And at the end of the day, no knock against furniture, but a chair is a chair, right? So, there's a lot of people doing it. For me, it was wanting to really be part of like a service-driven industry and have people that I could sell versus a product. And, the people that I work with and believing in what they do, and having confidence in the service that they provide. So just a totally different part of the industry that I felt was something that I hadn't ever touched on, being so into that furniture side. So for me, it was exciting to now get to know this other side of the industry, which is so far ahead of furniture too. So that's a big shift. Furniture is kind of last on the totem pole as far as, when things come in. Construction's really at the beginning. So kind of evaluating that too. So it's exciting, and being just part of a great team that I can have confidence in is really what drove me to switch.
I think I'd pick up on what Chris said. You get to a point where you're like, where do I go from here? So having been in a leadership role at a company, to go back to either a smaller company or a company where I didn't have a seat at the table on the leadership team just really didn't seem like an option to me. So you have to, when you get to that point in your career where you're like, where do you go from here? You have to make some of those tough decisions about what's important. And for me, I've been on the design and construction side of the industry for so long. I was always a planner. I was always, designing and constructing spaces for different companies. To move over to the operations side of the business gave me a chance to kind of, Steve Smith will laugh, go back to my roots and working with the facilities team and the move management piece and just seeing how spaces actually function and being able to support the operations of companies was something that I was really looking forward to making a change. So I think, Chris hit it on the head when she said, sometimes you have to look at where you are and where you're going and where is it that you're going to go next? What's next for you? And make sure that when you're looking at a transition, you're thinking about what do you want to do next? Because sometimes where you've been isn't a place that you can go back to.
Yeah. And the growth isn't always linear necessarily.
Yep.
Mm.
Take a step sideways to go forward sometimes.
Okay, great. And do you find it easier or more difficult to interview virtually during COVID? And if you had a second interview or follow up, did you ask to meet in person or at their offices, or was that offered? And also, if you were able to see the offices before accepting an offer, did the location or the design of the office influence your decision at all? Brenda, why don't you start us off?
Well, I think that it's always better in person. I think we could all agree that that would be the case just because of maybe being able to see someone's reaction a little bit more upfront. But I do think that sometimes having the ability to do the interviews COVID, you can actually do sometimes you can do more of them. And maybe they're in Atlanta or they're a national organization. So it somehow can speed up the process. So there are some pros and cons, but I do think if given the choice, because I have in meeting with some folks, they're like, well, it's up to you if you want to come in person. I would always pick to come in person if that's possible. So that would be something that would make a difference. And I think it does give you a little sense of the culture. It's not everything. I don't think that I would not take a job because of the environment, but I have to laugh a little bit because especially with your comment, Chris, a chair is a chair. I am a little bit snobby when it comes to my chairs. I have an old generation chair down here and I have not to put some plugs in there, but I have a Herman Miller Cosm chair that I love upstairs in another office. So there was one company I did interview with and I'm like, man, those look like those are like, I'm not going to say what kind of chairs, but I was like, $200 chairs. And I thought, that to me, but I've taken jobs and I'll be honest with you, even when I took the Herman Miller regional sales director position, I didn't love the spaces. I thought it was a little bit outdated and, now they've just moved to a new space. So I wouldn't let that limit me from making a decision. But I can't help but make some judgments, that kind of pop in my head. It could sway if I was kind of on a balance between one company and another. I will say that if I was really thought I could be happy in either one, I probably would take the one that I'm like, ooh, I could really love to go into that space over that one. So, but it wouldn't factor a final decision either way, I don't think.
Those are great points. Chris, how about you?
All right, Brenda, I know I should have thought about your furniture snob.
I am. I can't help it.
So all of my interviews were actually in person, and that was a big factor for me just to get to know the culture. I live on the North Shore and Timberline is in Canton. So when I interviewed, it was a 45-minute drive, which was, nothing. Since changed in the last couple of months. Traffic is definitely different. But I could tell just the pride in the office. Just on my first interview, the CEO took me around and wanted to show off. They had just completed construction of a new office a month prior. So that he was so proud to show me all the different amenities that he added to the office to make it a place where people wanted to be. So had I gone, for my interview maybe 3 months earlier when it wasn't the new space, I don't know if it would have been as an exciting opportunity to drive now 2 hours, but before, to go through, I don't know if I would, depending on, I guess, what it looked like. I hear it was nothing compared to what we have now. So I think a lot of that was, and that was part of the driver, I think, in my interview process with him touring me around and showing me all of the different amenities that were in the space, golf simulators and fire pits and cold brew and beer on tap and all these different things that we have. It makes it a destination for people to be at. So I think that was definitely a driver for me. And we have good furniture.
Awesome.
We do have good furniture.
Very important. And Robin, how about you?
Almost all my interviews were on Zoom. I mean, I was looking in 2020, and so it was definitely deep in the pandemic. It wasn't possible to go out and meet people. As I progressed in with specific companies, I did end up meeting them in person. I think that the space was not really a factor. I do think the location was. I mean, there was only so far that I was going to drive to commute. I'm not willing to sit in traffic for 2 hours every day, even for a golf simulator. So I think, to me, it was important to be working in an area that I wanted to work in and be close to the, I wanted to be in the life sciences. That's a sector that I've always been in. So to be close to Kendall Square, close to Cambridge, those were all important. We're in Somerville, which is really close by. And for me, the office was less important in terms of the quality of the space. Our offices are not what I would consider top of the line Class A office space, but we're an operations company. So I think the space is really appropriate for the type of company we are. And for me, it's more about the people. It's more about the relationship I have with the management team and with my coworkers and my direct reports, and having the flexibility to kind of come and go. And we have free parking. I mean, I got free parking in Somerville, so that's all good.
So as you guys were thinking through kind of a piggybacker here, are there other things you did to prepare for your next role while you were in transition? And, we've talked about career coaching and rewriting your resume. Any other tips that you might share that you found helpful?
I worked very, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I worked very closely with an executive coach. That was something that was really important to me, to have a sounding board, because it was deep in COVID and I was by myself at home. It was really hard to sometimes come up with the what was most important about my transition and my next job. So I did all the exercises. I wrote the pros and I wrote the cons. I made the Post-it notes. I did the vision board. I did all those different activities. But ultimately, it came down to talking to people about not only what I wanted to do. So that executive coach was important, but it was also important for me to do some research about the company that I was going to. So I reached out to people in my network that knew the different companies that I was interviewing with. I wanted to find out sort of an unimpeded view of what it was going to be like to work there, because I had to be able to feel like it was going to be a place that I would be successful. And the number one thing that I did, which people might laugh, is when I was getting up in the morning, I'd be lying in bed and the alarm would go off and I'd think about getting up and I would try to visualize myself getting dressed and going to this, whatever particular job I was looking at the moment. And I would have to say to myself, realistically, is this something that I want to get up, get dressed and go to and be excited about, or am I not excited about this transition? Am I not excited about this opportunity? So that the few minutes just in the morning, or at the end of the day when you get home from work, whatever it was, just taking those few minutes to check in on your gut. Is this going to be the right fit for me? So those were some of the strategies that I used when I was preparing.
Yeah.
I think you kind of hit it on the head there with tapping into your network too, because for me, I've always been really involved in Cornet, but Timberline wasn't as much. So I didn't really know anybody that Carol, I see you. Thank you for getting me involved in Cornet, Carol, Addie. So Timberline, I didn't know anybody. So for me, it was like, oh, I don't really know a lot about this company. Let me ask some of my people. And that's kind of what I did. I tapped into Cornet people that may have known about them, and just kind of got different opinions and then evaluated it that way. So I think I didn't have an executive coach, but I did have Post-it notes. So did my pros and cons. But I think you always have to rely on that. That's why we're here, right? And that's why we're part of this organization, is to have that network and that strong, relationships that are both professional and personal that you can tap into.
Mm-hmm. And we had talked a little bit about how you utilize your network. Certainly you could utilize it one way if you're currently employed and you need to be a little bit careful about your search, versus how you might utilize it if you're open to work. So maybe Chris, since you started chatting about that a little bit, you could start us off. Did you use that as a way to find job opportunities in addition to finding out what you could about Timberline? How did you use your network?
So yeah, I think because I wasn't, being secret about looking for a job, because it was during, I was laid off anyways, I, used LinkedIn. LinkedIn was adding all of those different banners that you could put around your photo and stuff, so I did that, and kind of put out a post on LinkedIn to my entire network. Previously though, when I was at a different company and was looking to change, when I was going from furniture to when I started at the OPM, I was looking while I was employed there. So for me, it was like, how do I do this? And it was really maybe 3 or 4 people that are involved in Cornet that I trusted, that I kind of put the word out, like, oh, if you hear anything, kind of situation. And I think I got a call like a few days later from somebody that person knew, that was like, oh, do you know anybody? And by anybody, I mean you. So that's kind of how that happened, where you just kind of have that circle of trust sort of thing, and you are able to tap into it and just say, if you know anything, I'm kind of thinking about changing, and what are your thoughts, or if you hear of anything, let me know.
Yeah. Brenda, it sounds like you've been particularly active growing your network too. How have you gone about that?
Well, and if you don't mind, I'll just touch on the transition portion, because, being in transition right now, I think that some of the things that are important, because there are some highs and lows, because you might have something that's like, this sounds really good, looks promising. And then you know what, we're going to hold off a year on this position. We've decided, due to, budgets or whatever. So you go through some highs and lows, and it's important when I think about, preparing, it's also mentally and physically. So it's like taking care of yourself, surrounding yourself with positive people, when with, especially with a merger, there can be some negative, like, oh, it's just surrounding yourself with positive people, because for me, I have nothing but positive things to say. It was a great experience, and just knowing the importance of that in the journey, because it can be challenging from that perspective, whether you want to meditate or, even just self-compassion, like just talk to yourself like you would if you had a friend that was going through this. I think some of those things are important. As far as the network, personally, the network is everything. I feel fortunate that, with the experience that I have and the number of years, I have a decent, and I'd say a good network. But I think there's also, and like Chris, we did the Leadership 2.0 together. I actually was a little hesitant to do the Leadership 2.0 because I thought, well, I'm a little bit on the older side. But it actually was just a wonderful experience. So I would highly recommend that. I and Robin actually I didn't use the same coach as her, but after I didn't know Robin before being on this panel together. But I also think in growing your network, you have to be a little fearless in reaching out to people that you don't know, instead of like, should I, they don't know me. It's like, give them an out if they don't have time, but it's like, you know what, I've heard your name in this industry forever. Would love to see if I could just, grab you on a Zoom call or a cup of coffee for, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. something along those lines. And I would say 90% of the people out there are more than willing to connect with you. People, kind of our nature is wanting to help others. So people do, they've been so generous with their time and input and everything else like that. So those are, for me, the LinkedIn and the network. I did hire a career coach, probably just, I've had like 2 sessions with her. And even that, just to me, I'm a very curious person. So I like to kind of learn from everybody. Chris Esposito and I have known each other a long time, but never really spent as much time as we have during Leadership 2.0. So I didn't hesitate to reach out to her to pick her brain on the GC side. So it's really utilizing anybody and everybody and that you can. So it's important.
Yeah, I would agree. My network, I've never gotten a job by answering an ad. Every job that I've ever had for my entire career has been through people that I know, through network, through organizations like Cornet, and those relationships are yours. You bring them with you wherever you go. I think the relationships that you form in your network are not just because that person can do something for you at that time. It's somebody that you have a connection with, someone that you have a shared past with, maybe either through maybe you worked together or you were on a committee together or you met in an event and you had an interesting conversation. So I think that network is something that you own. It becomes part of you. I always put a lot of effort into my network and make sure that my network is always active and extensive, because you never really know what opportunity is going to come around the corner. I utilized my network very, very heavily when I was in transition. Not only because there were people that were friends of mine that needed to know what was going on in my life and I needed their support, but also as I began to think about my transition, a lot of people in my network had really good advice for me, things that I hadn't even really thought about myself, whether it was a particular job I was looking after or a different career path. Their opinions were all really important to me. So I had continued to grow my network, even though I was in transition. And now that I've been in my new position, I've tried to reach back out to all those same people and, let them know where I've landed, and then obviously pay it forward with, people like Brenda and just meeting you and saying, listen, if I hadn't had so many people supporting me in my fairly extensive career, I don't think I'd be where I am today. And even I got 2 job offers at the same time, and they were both through my network. Neither of them were. They were both jobs that were going to be created specifically for me. So, they were looking, but they pursued me, and it was something that wasn't on an advertised posted job. So, I don't think I've ever had a job that was posted. So it's good to keep that network up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important too. When you touch on that, is just your network is yours wherever you go, right? And I think that that's so important to hone in on, because that is what you've built. It's your brand, right? And you're building your brand and you're building your network. So when you go to a different company or whatever the case may be, all of those people will now respect the company that you're working for because they respect you and they've worked with you on previous, opportunities. So that's like a big key. And you never know, like, I think, starting off in my career, and I think about the people that I networked with then, and most of them I still network with now because we all kind of grew up in the industry together. So I think that's, you never know where someone's gonna land or where they're gonna be. And, someone who's your competitor right now could be your coworker tomorrow. So you really don't know.
Yeah. I always make the bad joke that our industry is 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. You think there's no way you're going to see this person again, and then surprise. So yeah, relationships are very important.
Yeah, I've met recently went to visit a new client here at Dens, and I met our contact at the client organization. I didn't know him, and we started chatting, and it turns out that right after I left my position at Fidelity, he took the job there as an intern working for my same boss. So it was one of those small world incidents that, you say the 6 degrees of separation, it's probably actually on 3 or 4 in Boston. But it was such a small world that we both worked for the same guy, just like back to back at the same job. And we had no idea. So you never know where your network is going to send you. So
That's so true. So Christina, we'd like to pick your brain a little bit from the recruitment side. Kind of just what are the biggest takeaways that or trends that you're seeing from candidates looking for new jobs? Obviously the great resignation going on, you know, what companies are looking for in their new hires, and just anything else you kind of think is important to talk about today.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a candidate's market. I'm almost 7.5 years with Keller Augusta now, working in recruiting, and this is the busiest it's been in my time there. I would say facets, every facet of commercial real estate is hiring. I would say, for anyone who's maybe thinking, even if you're not sure, this is a great time to have conversations. I would also say that clients are not any less selective. So there's a lot of hiring going on out there, but clients are still very particular about making sure that they're rounding out their team appropriately. I do think more and more companies are going back to in-person interviewing, but Zoom interviews are probably here to stay in some capacity. It may be just your first interview. So being someone who can bring energy to your Zoom conversation, being able to convey your enthusiasm for a position when you're trying to do it virtually is a skill that everyone should keep up with. I think it's been really helpful for ease of scheduling and efficiencies. I think for candidates, it's also been helpful because it can make the first conversation feel a little more casual. So if you're, I don't want to say hedging your bets, but if you're still, exploratory, I think the Zoom interview can be helpful, because if you spend 45 minutes on a virtual conversation and then decide you don't want to go any further, great. It's 45 minutes of your day as opposed to 3 hours of commuting and meeting in person. So I think there are definitely good things about the virtual interviewing. I have definitely seen, certainly from a hiring perspective, inclusivity, teams wanting to make more inclusive hiring decisions and round out their teams that way. That has been very important, which can only be a good thing for both hiring firms and candidates. From the candidate side, I would say, firms always want to hear that people are enthusiastic and have done their research, to Chris's point, about the company. Candidates these days have a lot of options. They're probably, if they're interested in making a transition, I've seen now more than ever, they're not just chatting with me about things, they're chatting with 3 or 4 other companies at the same time. So companies want to hear that you're interested in them as a home, not just this job for now. So that is something for candidates to keep in mind as you're interacting with these firms. They want to know that you've done your homework too. Certainly interviewing goes both ways, candidate and the client. And then again, touching on relationships, in what we do, confidentiality is paramount. People who don't want it broadcast that they might be interested in making a transition. So we deal with confidentiality all day, every day. But I do know that, clients connect the dots. And they're going to, oh, so-and-so worked with so-and-so, and I know that job didn't go well. So to Chris's point, you never know who's going to know who. So building strong bridges, leaving places in an appropriate way, maintaining good, strong relationships, you never know exactly when that might come back. And I think maybe the last thing I might say for people looking to transition, we chat with folks, I think, being aware of, say you want to make a transition from furniture to construction or from architecture to development, being aware of the skill set that you currently have versus where you want to go. Sometimes it's not a straight step. Do you need to move from a design firm to maybe a third-party OPM firm and then over to the development shop? Being mindful of some of those skill gaps, because maybe what you're doing, you don't have any reason to have gained exposure to certain things, and that's why you want to make the transition. So sometimes it can be helpful to, again, utilize your network and understand where you are and where you want to go? Are there continuing education classes that you should take? Is there a pit stop between here and there that you should avail yourself of to really understand the best path from A to Z? But again, I would say, and maybe the last thing is, we're hearing about hybrid flexibility from all of our candidates across the board. More flexibility is very, very compelling. Some people would even be willing to give up a slight amount of compensation in exchange for the flexibility. I think obviously, depending on what part of the industry you're in, I mean, you're not going to get a GC that lets you work from home 5 days a week, but it's a difference certainly between hiring firms. But we've definitely seen a push for more flexibility and more hiring firms getting on board with that, because that's what candidates are demanding, for lack of a better way to say it. So I think we're probably going to see a happy medium. We'll see how long it lasts, but it's definitely something that we're seeing more and more clients adopt.
That's so interesting. Before we move on, I just want to say that if anyone does have any questions that they'd like to ask the panel, to please submit them in the chat box. And obviously, if you're not comfortable, everyone, the public being able to view that, feel free to private message, any of the panelists or Christina or I, and we will ask anonymously for you. So the next question is kind of just, what were your biggest lessons learned and takeaways from your transition experience? What's your one piece of advice that you would give others in transition, or is there anything that you wish you did differently? Brenda, I'll let you take it where you're in this process now.
It's funny. I don't know if there's anything I would have done differently. I mean, sometimes it would have been good to have a career coach earlier on, but I almost feel like it's been more helpful to kind of go through the process for a little bit and have maybe a couple things that, I've been offered but decided not to do. And just having someone maybe earlier on would have been nice to kind of have an objective person. But in some ways, I think it's the perfect timing. So for me, it's like, it is what it is. So I think that might have been my only thing that I would have done maybe just a little earlier. I mean, knowing that there was a merger that was happening, maybe being more prepared for that. But, I don't regret not just staying focused, because there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's hard to lead a team if you're sidestepping and doing all this other stuff, even though you do have to kind of protect yourself. So I don't regret that either, knowing that could have been a possibility. So the career coach maybe a little earlier would be my only thing.
Okay, great. And Robin, how about you?
So I would say you have to be prepared at any point in time that your life may change. I was very much unprepared for my change, and it took me a long time to wrap my head around the fact that I thought my life was going this way, but now it's going to go this way. So I think that in retrospect, I probably should have been a little bit more prepared, just personally, financially, for the fact that things could be different. I was so focused on being successful in my in my business, that it never even occurred to me that I wouldn't be there. That wouldn't be my choice. But that said, I think the advice that I would give anybody is, listen to your gut and be true to yourself. You're the best person to know what's going to make you happy in your job, whether it's, you want the salary, you want the title, you want the type of company, you want the culture, you want the skills that you're learning. You need to be honest with yourself, and you need to be true to yourself. So, follow your gut, make sure that, you've done the homework, that you've done the thinking. And I just have to give a plug in for the Leadership 2.0, because I did it a number of years ago. And I also, like Brenda, thought, oh, maybe I'm too old for this, or maybe this is not the right thing for me. But it gave me a lot of tools as I embarked upon my leadership journey, things that I didn't even know that I needed to have in place, or maybe things that I was doing that I just wasn't aware of. So I think, making sure that you take advantage when you can of those opportunities that are in front of you, to build that skill set. Like you said, Christina, about the building blocks in your career. Sometimes you can't get from point A to point C without going through point B. So make sure that you are building those things into your personal portfolio, your personal toolkit, so that you can be prepared to go into the direction that you want to go to. I don't think if I had taken Leadership 2.0 and had spent so much time learning to be a leader at Hariva, I would have been able to either even entertain the position that I'm in now if I hadn't had that experience. So I'm grateful for that.
I might jump in real quickly and say to your point, Robin, having worked with candidates, I find that the more flexible and open people are in terms of the different opportunities they're willing to chat about. We worked with a woman last year who went from development to asset management. She felt like there was just something missing. So I said, well, let's talk about this. She loves it, but you have to be really open and be willing to entertain and talk about and understand different seats at the table. And there's always more to look at, right? If you don't put yourself in a box too.
Yeah, I think it's not being afraid to take that risk and be able to come out of that comfort zone. Brenda has always been in furniture, but that doesn't mean she's only interviewing with furniture companies right now. I think you don't know what's out there, but I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason. So for me, it was like, even though my, OPM life was cut to like 2 months, it happened for a reason, because I think for me, my fit was to go to Timberline. I needed to take that building block, that unexpectedly that I didn't know about. So, I guess it's just not putting yourself in a box either. Just because you have a title of one thing at one company doesn't mean you can't do something else at another company.
It's very true.
Oh, sorry. The one other piece on the preparation I was just thinking about, I think we talked about this offline, is financially. And, it's like I've had, my dad has always said this, and if you have a financial advisor, to have 6 months of your expenses kind of in a rainy day fund. So, and I know that there's always something that's pulling, you're wanting to pull from that money, but if you can be very, kind of holding tight to that, that's an important piece too, because it allows you to breathe a little bit longer and not feel panicked from that standpoint. So fortunately, I did have a dad that was like, you need to, and we were good about that too. So that from a preparation standpoint, because as Robin mentioned, it could happen at any time, least when you least expect it, merger or no merger. So I think that's an important aspect too.
Sure, that's really important. And is there any unique aspect of your current role or work culture that you have now that really allows you to thrive, and that maybe you'd wish you advocated for earlier in your career? Robin, do you want to start on that one?
I would love to, because one of the reasons I came to Den's Facility Services was the diversity of culture here. I had been searching for diversity as an owner of a firm for a long time and found it very, very challenging and frustrating, the lack of diversity in our industry. And it was very confining. And by moving into the operations world and coming to a company like Den's, we have such a rich group of people of different backgrounds and cultures and colors and religions. And I'm loving it. I love the fact that the people, when I look around the room, and the people that I see are so different than me and the places that I worked before. So I'm thrilled that I made the decision to move more on the operations side. And the couple of concerns that I had about the change in role have just been completely pushed aside by the opportunities that I have in front of me. So I'm very happy about that.
That's great. Chris, how about you?
I think for me, I really thrive on team and being part of a team, and previously was not part of a team at the furniture situations. And so I think that was a big factor. And now being part of a team, and I guess I haven't plugged Leadership 2.0 yet. So here's my shameless plug. For me, taking it, I was like, well, I don't have anyone on my team. I'm not managing anyone, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to be managing someone tomorrow. And it doesn't mean it didn't teach me to interact with leadership at my company too. So I think, just because you don't have a team doesn't mean you shouldn't be part of Leadership 2.0. I think it taught so many different aspects of leadership, whether, personally and professionally. So for me, it's invaluable, the different lessons that you can learn. And then the relationships, like Brenda said, we've known each other probably for 20 years and have never talked more than we did in the last 6 months. So I think that, all came from that. So, but yeah, no, I think for me, I think culture and team is just really important. So that's a big driver.
Great. And Brenda, how about you?
To me, I'd go back to culture, but also learning. I would say even the difference, because Herman Miller was such a big company. So there was just so much learning opportunity, especially if you sought it. So whether it's from a leadership standpoint or diversity or anything that you wanted to kind of learn a little bit more, you could, I felt like I was able to do and take advantage of. I didn't feel like that necessarily was as prevalent for the people that worked for me. So it's like, it's important that that's kind of goes all the way through the culture in that learning. So to me, the learning piece is just, keeping you on your toes and making you more desirable for anywhere else you go.
So we only have about 5 minutes left. So we wanted to ask what we thought was maybe just a fun way to wrap it up. And Therese, I'm going to make you answer this one too. Is there a surprising or fun or unexpected interview question that you got? I thought this one was fun because I chatted with the candidate who was asked what he likes to do outside of work and was so taken aback, was not prepared to talk about that. So it's kind of a nice way to talk about work-life balance, but I thought that was kind of fun. So Robin, is there one that jumps out in your mind as one that was different or interesting, or maybe gave you insight onto the company?
Yeah, no, I was asked a little bit about, personal hobbies and what drives me. I know my current boss uses that as a way to remember people's names. So I think it's nice to not only ask someone about their personal hobbies or what they really like to do, but he uses it as a cue to memorize people's names. So I thought that was a good strategy. But no, I think what surprised me the most was how few interviewees put their cameras on when you're in a Zoom interview. It's really hard to interview with someone who doesn't have their camera turned on. So hopefully people will remember it. People have gotten a little more used to it now, and I think maybe, but I was always surprised when someone didn't turn on their camera.
Geez, yeah, interview 101. What about you, Brenda? Any fun
Well,
ones?
I've only had one interview where they didn't turn on the camera, and it definitely felt a little bit off-putting because I was like, should I turn mine off? Because now I feel that, it feels strange. But I don't know. I have had the question too, as far as what do you like to do? I've, outside of work, and what are you passionate about? And I felt like, because this guy was I think he was in the Marines, he was a pilot. He did a lot of, when I looked at him on LinkedIn and he did all these different things, I was like, I like to hike. I like to, mine just didn't seem as, grand or exciting, but, that seems like that's a more common question. And I think, as a sales leader, one was like, how do you measure your KPIs or your, just things like that. But I didn't have anything that was like, wow, that was shocking as far as a question. But I've only had the one interview that he didn't have the camera on. So nothing too outrageous.
All right, Chris, you're up.
No, I think they waited to ask the outrageous questions till I signed my letter. But I think if I was ever in an interview where I was talking to black screen, I think I would have to call them out and be like, is your camera not working? Because I can't see you. Because I don't think that that's, I mean, especially now where we're all so used to it at this point. I mean, turn your camera on. It's just, it is. I mean, this is different, obviously. I know everyone has their cameras off, so I'm not saying it here, but in an interview where it's just one-on-one, I think it's, you know, it's a little like you're just talking to that screen. So, but yeah, no, I think my outrageous questions were waited till my first day.
Yeah. I had
So,
a client
Chris, I
ask the
took-
candidate, if you could be any color crayon in the box, what would it be?
I like that one.
I'm not sure how I would have answered it.
And then what does
I'd
it
say-
mean? Like what?
Yeah, I'd say
what-
you're yellow, Christina, like sunshine.
Is there a chart that says if you answered so this color, it means this, or, you know, so that's kind of an interesting.
Yeah, who
Yeah.
knows?
I did have to take a personality test, but I've had to do that for a number of
Oh,
interviews in the
that's a good
past
one.
where you've had to take a personality test, either the Strengths Finder or one of the other tests. So I did, but I always find those really fun, so I didn't mind it.
I
Yeah.
didn't have any this time interviewing, but I do have a friend that just was interviewing outside the industry, and she got one that I thought was so great that it was, what would you do for work if money wasn't a factor, it didn't matter? And they said they asked because it just really tells more about you, you know, the real you and your personality, you know, outside of what you do for work. So I thought that was a good
Mhm.
one. And she said, I thought she had the perfect answer. She said a travel food critic, because it combines her loves of traveling and eating. I was like, that's perfect. If I ever get asked that question, I'm stealing that answer.
That's a good one.
Well, I'm going to jump in here as we're almost out of time, and so many excellent points. I think I'm going to have to watch this video a couple times. I took a lot of notes, but really great discussion. And thank you, Robin, Chris, and Brenda, and also Therese and Christina for moderating. And thanks to everyone for joining this afternoon. Just a couple of takeaways is to take the time to focus on you. Network. That's key. Thanks for the Cornet mentions. Those are always key too. And one note that I made was be prepared to do the research and do the thinking. I think that was really an interesting comment. So thanks everyone again, and hope to see you at our next program.
Thanks,
Have a good
Catherine.
afternoon.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you.
Have
Bye.
a great day.
Bye.
Bye.